Drive back to Millhaven takes 4 hours from the city, and I know every mile of it by heart. I know where the highway narrows past the Denton overpass. I know the exact bend where you lose radio signal for 11 minutes, right before the old grain elevator comes into view on the left. I know the rest stop at mile marker 214, where my mother used to let me pick one thing from the vending machine. Always the peanut butter crackers, always the ones stuck halfway down that she'd coaxed loose by tilting the whole machine while I stood watch. I hadn't made this drive in 3 years. The radio found a country station on its own, something slow and steel guitar heavy, and I didn't change it. I let it play. Outside, the fields were that particular shade of November brown that looks less like a color and more like an absence of one flat and wide and honest in a way that city blocks never quite managed to be. My sister-in-law had called 2 weeks ago. My brother Garrett was getting an award at the Millhaven Veterans of Foreign Wars Hall, a community service commendation, something the Post gave out every few years to a local veteran who'd stayed involved. He'd coached youth baseball for 11 years. He ran the food drive every November. He deserved it. "We'd love for you to be there," she said. She didn't sound like she'd love it. She sounded like she was reading from a script that someone had written for her, and she'd agreed to use without practicing it first. I told her I'd come. I packed a bag that night. 2 days, 1 change of clothes, the small leather folder I carry everywhere, out of habit. I didn't tell anyone else I was coming. I didn't announce it in the family group chat. I just drove. My sister-in-law's name is Renee. She married my brother 6 years ago in a ceremony at a vineyard outside of Charlottesville, and she's been the kind of beautiful that makes other people nervous ever since. Not because she's unkind, exactly. She's careful about that, always careful. But because she has a way of measuring things. People, mostly. She measures them fast, like a cashier who's worked the register for years, and once she has a number, she sticks with it. She had a number for me. I figured it out about 8 months into her marriage to Garrett at a Thanksgiving dinner at our parents' house. I just finished my 2nd year, and I was tired in the specific way that second-year residents are tired. Like something that used to be a person is now mostly a reflex in a white coat. I wasn't good company. I was quiet, and I ate too fast, and I fell asleep in the armchair before dessert. I heard her in the kitchen later, talking to Garrett. "She doesn't try," Renee said. "With people. She just sort of sits there, expects everyone to accommodate her schedule, her mood. I don't know why your parents think she's so special." Garrett said something low that I couldn't hear. Then Renee again, "No, I'm serious. What has she actually done that's impressive? She went to school. A lot of people go to school." I lay very still in the armchair and pretended to keep sleeping. The number she'd assigned me was something like tolerated, mediocre, given too much credit for too little. I got up after a while, cleared my own plate, and drove home. The years between that Thanksgiving and this November were not simple years. I finished my residency. I did a fellowship. I moved to Philadelphia and took a position that I'd been working toward for longer than most people spend in a marriage. It was the kind of position that doesn't come with a press release. Most people wouldn't know what the title meant even if I said it out loud, but to the people who knew the field, it carried a particular weight. I didn't talk about it much at home. My parents knew I was a doctor. They knew I'd done well. The details, the specific institution, the specific role, what it meant in the context of my specialty, those details lived somewhere outside the vocabulary we used at family gatherings. My dad would say, "She's a doctor," and that was enough for him, said with a fullness that embarrassed me a little because I loved it so much. Renee had decided, years ago, that she's a doctor meant she's fine, nothing extraordinary, just a regular doctor like there are 1,000 of. And I'd never corrected her. That probably sounds like I was waiting for something. I wasn't. I genuinely was not constructing some slow burn moment. I just didn't see the point in performing my resume for someone who'd already decided who I was. The VFW Hall in Millhaven is on the corner of Prospect and 9th. In a building that used to be a hardware store, they kept the original pressed tin ceiling. I'd been going there since I was 8 years old, dragged along to functions from my dad's service years, and it always smelled the same. coffee from an urn that was probably older than me, and something like wood polish. And the specific dry warmth of a building that's been heated by the same furnace for 40 years. I arrived alone. Parked down the block. Stood outside for a moment longer than I needed to. The parking lot was half full. I could see through the streaked glass of the front door that people were already inside, milling around folding tables with tablecloths that didn't quite reach the floor. I recognized the back of my Aunt Connie's head. A man from my father's old hunting group whose name I could never remember. The Hendersons, who'd lived 3 doors down from us for 30 years. I went in. Garrett saw me first. He was across the room talking to the post commander, and when he looked up, his face did something complicated. Surprised and glad, and just behind that, something careful. Something that said this might get interesting. He came over and hugged me. He smelled like the same shampoo he'd used since we were teenagers. I hugged him back hard. "You came," he said. "Of course. You didn't say you were coming, I know." He pulled back and looked at me. He started to say something, then stopped. Behind him, Renee was making her way through the crowd. She'd dressed for the occasion, a cream-colored blouse, heels that were ambitious for a VFW hall floor, earrings that caught the light. She looked polished and deliberate, and she aimed a smile at me that landed about 6 inches past my left ear. "Oh," she said, "you made it." "Hi, Renee. We weren't sure you'd come. I know you're so busy." She said busy the way some people say important, which is to say with a specific tone that drains the word of any respect while leaving the shape of it intact. "Garrett said he tried to reach you." "He did." I called him back. "Right." She looked me over once, efficient, like she was confirming what she already knew. "You look tired." "Long drive." "Of course." She touched Garrett's arm briefly. "I'm going to go check on the catering situation." The cold cuts were not where I told them to be. She moved off into the crowd and I watched her go, and I thought, 4 hours. I can do 4 hours. The event was loose and warm in the way that small town gatherings are, people moving between clusters, old friendships restarting mid-sentence like a song you left, paused, kids running around the back near the folding chairs. There was a buffet line along one wall. The cold cut situation appeared to have been resolved. I found my parents near the front. My dad looked good, better than the last time I'd seen him, which had been a video call in August when he'd been fighting off a chest cold that had scared me more than I let on. He was standing straight, talking to an old friend of his, and when he saw me, he broke into a grin that was so genuinely happy it almost undid me right there between the coat track and the water pitcher. "There she is," he said and hugged me. My mother held my face in her hands for a moment. "She does this. She looks at me like she's checking that I'm real." "You look thin," she said. "Mom." "I'm just saying." "Do they feed you in Philadelphia?" "They do. They feed me in Philadelphia." She released my face and looked at me in the way she has, assessing, quiet, deciding something. "It's good you came," she said. I spent the next hour in the easy current of it, catching up with people I'd known my whole life, answering the standard questions. Yes, still in Philadelphia. Yes, still the hospital. No, no husband, not currently. Yes, it keeps me busy. I slipped into the rhythms of Millhaven like putting on a coat I'd kept in the back of the closet. It still fit. Renee found me near the dessert table around 40 minutes in. "So are you still at Penn?" she asked, reaching past me for a brownie. "I'm affiliated with Penn, yes. My work is actually based out of the Harrington Institute now." "Oh." She had no idea what the Harrington Institute was. I watched her decide not to ask. "Is that a step down from Penn, or it's a different thing?" "Right." She broke the brownie in half, considered it. "Garrett was worried you wouldn't be able to take the time off. I guess they give you a lot of flexibility. I manage my own schedule." She set the brownie down. "That's nice. I always thought about medicine when I was younger. I could have gone that route. I was pre-med for a year at Hollins. Did you know that?" "I didn't. I decided it wasn't for me." "The lifestyle." She smiled. "I respect people who do it. I just don't think I could give up that much of my personal life for a career." She paused, just long enough, though I guess when you don't have much of a personal life to give up, it's easier. I looked at her. She looked at me. She was still smiling. "Excuse me," I said, and went to get some coffee. The formal part of the evening started around 7. Folding chairs arranged in rows, a small podium, the post commander adjusting a microphone that was slightly too tall for him. There was a color guard. 3 veterans, older men in their uniforms, moving with the specific, careful dignity of people who know exactly what the ceremony means. I found a seat near the side. My parents were in the front row. Renee sat beside Garrett, one hand on his arm, her posture perfect. There were 3 awards. Garrett was second. When they called his name, he walked up with the slight self-consciousness of someone who's more comfortable doing good things than receiving credit for them, and I felt a rush of real pride. The uncomplicated kind, the kind that doesn't need context. I clapped hard. He glanced over at me and grinned. The commander said kind things about the baseball coaching, about the food drives, about the fact that Garrett Whitfield had shown up every single year without being asked twice. He said community is built by people who don't keep score of what it costs them. It was a good speech, short and true, which is the best kind. Afterward, people stood and circulated again. The atmosphere loosened. Someone put on music. Nothing much. Just background. The color guard had dispersed to the back of the room where there was apparently a separate urn of coffee that I hadn't found yet. I was standing near the window talking to one of Garrett's baseball parents, a man named Ted, whose son had apparently gone on to pitch in college, which made Ted incandescent with pride in the best possible way. When I heard someone behind me, "Dr. Whitfield?" I turned. He was a tall man in his mid-60s, wearing a dark blazer over a collared shirt, no tie, but carrying himself in the particular way that people who've spent decades in command carry themselves. Not stiff, exactly, but settled. Like he occupied his own space very deliberately and had made peace with exactly how much of it that was. I recognized him after a second. He'd been at the podium earlier, briefly, for an introduction I'd half listened to. Someone from the Regional Veterans Health Initiative, I thought. Or the state VFW chapter. Yes, I said. He put out his hand. Richard Okafor. I think we met at the symposium in Boston 2022. You gave the afternoon address. Right. I shook his hand. Of course. How are you? Better than I deserve. He smiled. It reached his eyes. I didn't know you were from Millhaven. I'm here for the chapter event. I've been on the state board 3 years. Didn't expect to run into anyone from, he gestured, a small motion that encompassed the larger professional context. That world. My brother is Garrett Whitfield. He just received the commendation. Your brother. He glanced toward the front of the room with what looked like genuine surprise. Small world, absolutely. He shook his head. You know, I cited your research in a presentation I gave in October. The work on post-deployment neurological screening changed how our regional coordinator thinks about the intake protocol. That's good to hear. We've been trying to. It's important work. He said it simply, without the inflation that people sometimes put on compliments. Just, it's important work. Here's why. The veteran population has been underserved in that specific area for a long time. I've been in advocacy for 20 years, and the conversation has only just started to catch up to what your team's been finding. Ted had quietly drifted away, which I appreciated. I became aware, in that low-grade peripheral way, that Renee was nearby. I didn't look for her. I kept my attention on Richard Okafor, who was asking me a genuine question about the longitudinal component of our current study, and I answered it. It happened a few minutes later. An older woman approached. I'd seen her talking to Richard earlier, someone else from the state chapter. Her name tag said Doris H. And she touched Richard's arm to get his attention. He held up a finger. One moment. I'm sorry to interrupt, Doris said to me, not sounding sorry but saying it in the correct way, the way that people who've spent time in institutional settings learn to signal courtesy even when moving efficiently. I just need to borrow him for the photo with the post commander. Of course. Richard looked at me. I'll track you down before you leave, he said. I want to ask you about the Hopkins collaboration. I'll be here. He paused. Oh, and for anyone who might not know, he said it mildly, the way you state a fact that you're making sure is on the table. Not performing it, not announcing it, just stating it. Dr. Whitfield is the director of the Harrington Neurological Research Institute. Her team's work is what we're basing half our new regional health initiative on. He said it to me, not to anyone in particular, though I was aware that particular statement had a small radius. I keep forgetting to ask, are you still doing the residency training component, or did that get folded into still running it? I said. Good. He nodded. That matters. And he let Doris pull him away toward the photo. The room was not silent, nothing so dramatic as that. People were still talking, still moving, still eating the last of the cold cuts. Ted was back and saying something to someone else about his son's ERA. But in the immediate 4 or 5 feet around me, there was a different quality of attention, the kind that isn't loud. My Aunt Connie, who had been standing nearby, said, "Honey, director?" Yes. She looked at me for a long moment. Why didn't you tell us? It didn't come up. From my left, maybe 8 feet away, Renee had not moved. I hadn't looked directly at her yet, and I didn't now. But I was aware of her, the way you're aware of a window when the temperature drops outside. My mother appeared at my elbow. She had clearly heard. She put her hand on my arm and didn't say anything. Garrett found me near the coat rack 20 minutes before the end. Director, he said. He was grinning, but there was something else in it. Don't. I'm not doing anything. I'm just director. Garrett. Of the Harrington Institute? He said it slowly, like he was tasting each word. Which is the neurological research. Yes. Right. He was quiet for a moment. And you didn't tell Mom and Dad because I told Mom and Dad they know I have a position. They know you're a doctor. There's a difference between knowing you're a doctor and knowing that people are basing federal health initiatives on your research. It would have been a strange dinner conversation. He looked at me. The grin had settled into something quieter. She said something to you tonight? I didn't ask who. She said several things? Yeah, he exhaled. She does that. I know she does that. He rubbed the back of his neck. She's not. She doesn't mean it as badly as it lands sometimes. I know. I'm going to talk to her. You don't have to. I do, actually. He said it quietly, not angry, just settled. I do. Because I let it go too many times, and that's its own kind of thing. He looked across the room toward where Renee was talking to my mother, and something in his expression was private in the way that married people carry private things. I'm proud of you, he said. I should have said that more. I didn't say anything for a second. The furnace clicked on somewhere behind the wall. You coached baseball for 11 years, I said. That's different. It's not, actually. He laughed once, short and quiet. We stood there by the coat rack for a moment, in the particular warmth of it. Richard Okafor found me on my way out, as promised. He asked about Hopkins. I told him the collaboration was in its early stages, probably a year away from anything concrete, but the framework was solid. He said he'd be in Philadelphia in the spring and asked if I'd be open to a meeting with the state initiative leadership. I said yes. He shook my hand again. I mean it about the work, he said. It matters to the people we're trying to serve. That's why we do it. He nodded. Safe drive home. The parking lot was cold. My breath came in small clouds and the gravel crunched under my shoes, that specific crunch that belongs to November and nowhere else. I sat in my car for a few minutes without turning the engine on. Through the lit windows of the VFW hall, I could see shadows moving, people gathering coats and saying goodbyes, the specific winding down shape of an evening that had been a good one. My brother's silhouette near the front, my mother, small and certain, pausing near the door to say one last thing to someone. Renee had found me briefly before I left. She'd come up while I was saying goodbye to my parents, and there was something different in the way she was standing, something that wasn't quite an apology and wasn't quite not one. She said, I didn't know. About the Institute. A pause. That's impressive. I had looked at her for a moment. Thank you for putting the event together, I said. Garrett deserved tonight. That was all. Not because I was being strategic, not because I was constructing some careful exit line, just because that was the truest thing, and the most true things are usually the shortest ones. I started the car. The radio came on. I sat there in the cold for another minute, listening to whatever the station found on its own. I thought about the drive home. 4 hours. The bend where the signal drops. Mile marker 204. The fields that looked like an absence of color and were, somehow, still beautiful. I thought about my brother's face when he heard his name called at the podium. The way he walked up, careful, a little embarrassed, glad. The way he glanced at me. I thought about my mother holding my face in her hands. I didn't think much about the rest of it. Not about Richard Okafor's words carrying across the room, or whatever particular silence had gathered in those few feet around me when they did. That had happened, and it was finished, and it didn't need to be carried. The thing is, I'd driven 4 hours to watch my brother receive a commendation for 11 years of showing up. That was the whole point of the evening. Everything else was just weather, the kind that moves through and leaves the air cleaner after. I pulled out of the parking lot and onto Prospect Street, past the hardware store that's a flower shop now, past the diner where the sign has been missing its D for as long as I can remember, past the water tower at the edge of town with its peeling letters, Millhaven Pop. 4200. The highway on-ramp curved up and out. I let the radio play. I had work in the morning. I always had work in the morning. That was not a complaint. It was the best thing I could say about my life, that every morning there was something worth getting up for, something that mattered beyond the edges of my own small history. 4 hours home. I knew every mile. The fields opened up on either side of me, dark now, November flat, and somewhere ahead of me the city was already lighting itself up against the sky, not asking permission, not explaining itself. I drove. I've been thinking about that parking lot a lot since I drove home. Not about Richard Okafor's words, not about the particular stillness that settled in that small radius around me when he said what he said. I've thought about those things, briefly, the way you touch a bruise to confirm it's healed. But what I keep coming back to is something quieter, something that happened before any of that. It's the moment I decided, years ago, not to correct Renee. I want to be honest about why I made that choice, because I think the honest version is more useful than the flattering one. The flattering version is that I was above it, too secure, too focused on what actually mattered to bother performing my accomplishments, for someone who'd already decided who I was. And there's some truth in that. But the fuller truth is that I also just didn't know how. I didn't have a clean way to say what I do matters without it sounding like I was arguing a case I shouldn't have to argue. So I stayed quiet. And then, quiet became a habit. And the habit became something I had to decide, each time, whether to break. What I've learned, not from one night in Millhaven, but from years of it, is that integrity has a kind of compounding effect that nobody tells you about when you're young. The work you do when no one's measuring it, the times you show up when it would have been easier not to, the problems you keep turning over long after a reasonable person would have set them down. Those things accumulate, not in a way that announces itself, not in a way that gets you a parade, but in the way that, eventually, a stranger in a VFW hall in your hometown knows your name and knows what your research changed and tells you so simply, without fanfare, because it's just a fact. Renee wasn't wrong that I gave up a lot for my career. She was wrong about what that meant. She read sacrifice as deficit, as evidence of something missing, something I'd failed to build. But sacrifice is only a deficit if you're building toward the wrong thing. I wasn't giving up a life. I was constructing one, slowly, in the only way I knew how to construct things worth having, by showing up every day for something larger than my own comfort. My brother Garrett understands this, I think, even if we've never said it out loud in those terms. 11 years of coaching kids who weren't his own, running food drives in a town that mostly takes him for granted. He wasn't doing that to earn something. He was doing it because he decided what kind of person he wanted to be, and then he just kept being it. The commendation was not the point. The 11 years were the point. The people who measure others quickly, who assign numbers fast and file them away, they're not evil. Renee isn't evil, she's just someone who learned early to protect herself from disappointment by expecting less from people before they can surprise her. I understand that mechanism. I don't blame her for it, but I also know that it costs her something she probably doesn't fully see yet: the ability to be genuinely surprised by someone in the good way. The ability to be in a room with a person for 6 years and still not know what they're carrying. What I carried was never about impressing her. It was never about that room or that parking lot or the look on her face when she said, "That's impressive," in the particular tone of someone recalculating. What I carried was the work itself and the patience it was built around, and the residents I train every year who will go on to carry it further than I can reach. That's the thing about doing something real. It doesn't need you to announce it. It just keeps being real whether anyone in the room knows it or not. I drove home through the dark fields, and the radio played, and I had work in the morning. That was enough. It always was.